Hello, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Connect Africa, to our bi-weekly session. It's every Tuesday and Thursday, but because of some technical problem, our Tuesday session has moved. For today, the one we do with our analyst Kwame Gonza. Well, we are here just for this week. Other than that, we will keep same days every Tuesday and Thursday. So for tonight, our topic is it's a hot topic. It's what's going on in the continent. The BRICS 2023 summit, which is just ended in South Africa, the foreign ministers meeting ahead of the president's meeting, I think, which is going to happen in August. As we have seen, the mainstream media has tried to overshadow it by will President Putin participate or not, instead of really bringing out the real message that has been put out by the BRICS foreign ministers. But we are going to do that for you. So that's why we have here Kwame Gonza. Welcome, Kwame, once again.
Thank you, Mahlet. Thank you so much, and greetings to everyone who's watching us. Greetings from Connect Africa. We thank you, all of you who are supporting the channel, who are signing up to the channel, who are sharing the channel with other people out there and inviting them to come and support the channel. So we are really so glad for that you are doing. Like we mentioned, we don't only stop at analyzing, but we are also in the field. We are on the ground trying to push the African agenda and the African narrative. Because if we don't push it, then who else is going to push it? So if we are pushing on the front line, then you have to come out and support us. Like we said in the past, we are working with different organizations, State of African Diaspora, Pan-African Congress, Worldwide Pan-African Movement, the PLO Lumumba Foundation, numerous organizations, Africa Continental Unity Party, Economic Fighters League. These are all Pan-African organizations who are on the front line. So if we are on the front line, then you have to support us, and you start with the channel. Like we do, we are here, of course, to deliberate on certain events that are happening across the globe. And clearly, everyone has been hearing about the BRICS summit that is coming on in August, whereby the BRICS ministers, including South Africa, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. South Africa, of course, which represents the African continent in this aspect. And that is why even this summit is going to happen in Johannesburg. This time, the slogan is BRICS and Africa. So it tells you how important BRICS sees Africa, China, India, and all the other countries with Russia. They want also to work together with Africa to create a new environment that is favorable. These countries, all of them can be considered as global South countries. And they have agreed to work with Africa to be able to lift each other economically, in all aspects, diplomatically, and even on the international stage, to help all of us, to help our people, to create a community, a shared community of all of us, in the globe, not just a few group of people who are loading it, since about 500 years ago, who have been loading it on majority of the population of the world. So these are the things which we want to discuss. These are the things which we want to talk about. And I thank you, Mahlet, also for pioneering to start this platform, which is very, very important and allows us to deliberate on our continent. Thank you very much, Mahlet, and welcome everyone who's watching us out there.
Thank you very much, Kwame. Yeah, we do value that your presence here, and what we do is we bring topics. I mean, as much as we can. We are limited, of course. We come here with Kwame Gonza every on bi-weekly session, which is every Tuesday and Thursday, and on Friday, not consistently, but we have also with Dr. Biniam, where we look at the issue in the Horn of Africa. So really, please share the message. That's the most important thing for us. And those of you who can support us, you may support us on the links that I'm going to put in the comment in the chat section. Definitely. And our also keep on tuned. Our website is coming, not only discussion here, so we will be able to put our articles over there. So there are people who are behind us, who are helping us, trying to do things. Our faces here, but there are people also behind us sharing our message, and in every aspect. So now let's go to the discussion without further ado. Let's start. I think it's good if you can give us an overview of the Foreign Ministers Summit.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mahlet. First of all, let me ask our viewers to go out there and support the website, where there is numerous and plenty African-centered news. The website is called africainterest.org, which was put up and started by our brother called Lambert from East Africa. He writes a lot, and we all work together to write information there which is important and Africa-centered. We are trying to push the African narrative on that front. As our website is coming, which is called connected to africa.org, then you can, for now, be checking out africainterest.org. Go out there and read the important news concerning our continent. You asked about the BRICS summit. What I can say is that the summit is sort of like I think it is a forerunner, the BRICS Ministerial Summit or Foreign Ministers Summit, which happened a few days ago, to the point that they even gave a joint statement. A joint statement was issued on the 2nd of June, just a few days ago. This meeting, which happened on the 1st of June until the 2nd, a joint statement was issued. I think that this meeting, or this summit, this ministerial summit or foreign ministerial summit, is sort of like a forerunner to what is coming in August, when the presidents from the BRICS countries meet. And of course, they reiterated what the presidents are going to be deliberating about also when they meet in South Africa, in Johannesburg, in August. And one of those things which were emphasized, the highlight, of course, when they issued the press statement, a joint press statement, it contained more than 30 points, which of course we cannot read all of them, but we will just, give you the highlight. And the highlight was that there is a need for the global South to work together and push for a new world. Even when you listen to the speech by the Prime Minister, by the Foreign and Relations Minister, Madame Naledi Pandor of South Africa, she mentioned that we want to create a world where, this is just paraphrasing, we want to create a world where we all take care of each other. And Jeshkanda, the Foreign Minister, Jeshkanda of India, also mentioned that things like production and all the other issues around the globe, technology, they should be shared by all humanity, not to be hoarded by a few people. And they mentioned the reformation of the United Nations, of course, and they mentioned the bullying that goes on, across the world, the coercion, they called it coercion measures that are applied, to the global South countries by these big nations. So this was, in general, the highlight of the summit, that there is a recognition that we have to work for this new world which we want to bring about. And that world should not be dominated by only a few people going about bullying here, bullying there. And of course, they're talking about the Western, countries. They're the ones who hoard technology. They are the ones who are hoarding vaccines. They are the ones who are hoarding this. They are the ones who are going about bullying everyone. They are the ones who are standing in the way of the reformation of the United Nations. So in general, the ministers of foreign affairs of the BRICS countries came to deliberate and retaliate, or to be forerunners of the important aspects of the upcoming BRICS summit that is going to happen in Johannesburg, which is going to be attended by all the presidents of, who are coming from the BRICS countries, that is China, Brazil, Russia, India, and of course South Africa, and of course the idea of looking at the new monetary policy, issuing a new currency, BRICS currency, which they have been speaking about, and on the other side also, admitting in new members. We hear in that also countries like Angola have applied, Argentina, we hear Egypt also has applied, various countries, across the continent and across the world, like they have mentioned, even Saudi Arabia to a certain extent, which of course has, made the United States panic a lot if they admit, if they admit Saudi Arabia in there. So more than 19 countries have applied to join BRICS. So these are all the issues which the ministers want to prepare ahead, so that it will be easier for the presidents of the BRICS countries who are going to meet in August, starting 22nd, as we mentioned.
Thank you very much, Kwame, for giving us that background, as then it helps us, to build our discussion or our talking points for tonight. So now, what was really the consistent message that the BRICS countries or these members are sending out to the World War II order led by the US, which emerged after the defeat of European colonialism?
Yeah, I think the message is very clear. The message is very clear that the world has to change. The world cannot continue to operate in the old way. If you look at the financial system that was crafted, the financial architecture that was crafted after the World War II, after the defeat of European colonialism, the United States took on the mantle of colonialism. Of course, it continued to colonize the rest of the world, just like how the Europeans did, but in a subtle way, in a hidden way, claiming that it is spreading democracy and liberty. So now it has come to a point where the world has realized that these guys are not spreading democracy or liberty. They are not spreading any of that. And that is evident in the number of coups the United States has carried out all across the globe, in Iran, in South America, in Africa itself. So the United States and its group of allies, because this pack of allies, the so-called NATO and Five Eyes, these are all colonial countries who are coming together to continue that policy of exploiting the world. So the BRICS are responding to that and saying this cannot be, it cannot continue, it cannot be business as usual. The financial system whereby at this conference, at this summit also, it was mentioned that sanctions have been used unilaterally. You look at the sanctions, for example, which were imposed on Zimbabwe. They were illegal. The United Nations, declared them illegal, and yet they are still there. The United States has still applied those sanctions. They have still refused to remove those together with their European allies. So this is the abuse of the United Nations, that these people who are Europeans and Anglo-Saxons, they have made the United Nations their playground and prohibit the others from using it. So the message is that the financial system across the globe, whereby the dollar is used as a means of hegemony and controlling the world and claiming superiority, United States exceptionalism, the US, they are the exceptional people, they are special people. So they are coming up, the BRICS countries are coming up against this and saying, this is racist. This is a racist way of thinking, to claim that you are superior and you should tell all the other people what to do. And yet you are not in any way more intelligent than them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't have any special, you are not given, you are not elected. You are not even elected democratically to carry out this, but you are imposing your will, you know, upon other people. So I think that this is the order which the BRICS countries are out there trying to challenge and say, we cannot continue like this. We cannot continue to live in a world where a few people continue to enjoy the fruits of the world, the fruits of the land, you know, of the earth, while the others are suffering. You have seen that the United States, for example, is 5%, just even less than 5%. It's just around 4.5% of the global population. Yet this country has been consuming more than 25% of the global resources. So this kind of world cannot continue. The other day, Madam Chiombori Huao spoke about how African countries, when they go to the IMF and World Bank to get loans, they get at 7%. And these are the poor countries. The United States, which is already rich, and European countries, when they go to get money from the World Bank, they get at 3%, 2%. And this is unacceptable. So this is the order which the BRICS countries are saying that this has to change. We cannot continue in this direction. And so that is why you see that they have come up with the idea of launching a BRICS currency. They have come up with the idea of establishing the new development bank, which is based in Shanghai, which are headquartered in Shanghai. This is the BRICS Bank, which should be able to give loans instead of, give loans, especially to the global south, instead of the World Bank, which imposes draconian, exploitative, and racist means, on the rest of the global south. So I think this is the message which was being sent out clearly, that the message which is being sent out even right now is that the order which rose, where the United States is leading in hegemony and colonization, which is indirect colonization and overthrowing of governments, dominating the International Monetary Fund, dominating the UN. All these have to be, all these have to be stopped. These have to be defeated. So I think this is the message which they are sending out, that we have to change the world and how it is operating. New institutions have to be created if the old institutions cannot be reformed. We have seen we have seen the creation, like we mentioned, the creation of a new development bank, which is headquartered in Shanghai, is because the World Bank and the IMF have failed to be reformed. People have pushed for the reformation. People have pushed for, the reforming the United Nations Security Council, permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. These people have refused to reform the United Nations Security Council. They want to hold those dictatorial powers, which are not democratic, and yet they are the same people who are talking about democracy. So it is contradictory, and not only contradictory, not just contradictory, actually, it is hypocritical that these are hypocrites who are saying a different thing and doing a different thing. So that order, I think, has to be challenged, and that's what the ministers are trying to point out to the rest of the world. And that's the message they are sending to the United States and the Europeans.
Thank you very much, Kwame. Now, let's assume that, picking the currency by itself it's another issue, or are they going to come up with a new currency? Are they going to pick a currency from one of the founding members? But that's, of course, a topic by itself, a question that needs a whole explanation or analysis. But let's
I think that issue of the currency is not necessarily going to be a currency that is going to be used within countries, but it's going to be a trading currency. It is a means. It's going to be a means of exchange, which the BRICS countries use to carry out trade amongst themselves.
So without really letting out your own currency or dropping out your currency.
Yes. It is just going to bypass the dollar and establish a currency. Let me say, let's say, for example, you can say we have established a gold standard currency. which is going to be a unit of measurement for our trade.
Yeah.
So it's just to establish that and then remove the dollar. It means removing the dollar and establishing a new unit of currency whereby you will use that one to measure your trade and do transactions amongst yourselves without needing the United States dollar. That is what they are trying to establish.
Okay, thank you. It's a bit clearer. Now, from the economic point of view, can you give us an assessment of BRICS and its influence over the global economy if it start to, work now from talking, if they go to practical? You just told us that this development bank is set up in Shanghai already. And also, is it enough to cause an alarm in the European camp if those who have called themselves the master of the universe for the last 500 years?
Yeah, of course, it is causing an alarm already. You have seen how the United States has reacted to the point that it wanted to make sure it stops the BRICS summit, which is coming in August from happening in August. That these tactics whereby the United States threw an alarm that South Africa has loaded weapons and sent them to Russia, as if that is a crime, under international law. It is not a crime under international law. And so this is the bullying. So it caused an alarm already. And they also wanted to stop any activity, any BRICS activities from going on in South Africa, like what we are seeing, this summit, which was for the ministers of foreign affairs. So they knew that this was coming on. So they wanted to cause some confusion. So it is already causing an alarm. We have seen Blinken is in Saudi Arabia right now. So he came to Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia has expressed interest in joining. So this is the alarm which BRICS has caused within the corridors of the aggressors and the colonialists. So they are terrified. A few days ago, we mentioned the German economy is shrinking. It shrunk by 0.3. In the first quarter, in the fourth quarter last year, 2022, it shrunk by 0.4%. So there's economic problems. So people like Blinken, when you see them in South Africa, they are trying to beg South Africa to act in a certain way because they have been insulting everyone, they have been bullying everyone, throwing everyone. So they have they over misused, let me say, they have misused the power, the position which they have been occupying. They have misused their money, their sanctions. And so we see that countries now are expressing interest in joining BRICS. We see Iran today reopened its embassy in Saudi Arabia, which has been closed for a very long time, many years. It reopened the embassy today. And Iran also has expressed interest in joining BRICS. So this causes extreme alarm. And when you add the economies, when you put together the economies of the BRICS countries, the economies are, in purchasing terms, they are bigger than the economies of G7 countries when you put them together. So it is a source of alarm. It is a source of cause of, alarm in its reality, because if they establish a bank and many countries come in to join, then definitely this bank would even be, bigger than the World Bank or even the IMF. It is possible that the bank would be bigger than, because people would start running from the IMF and the World Bank and leaving them, abandoning them, and coming to the new development bank to borrow money, to carry out transactions, if the things are very favorable there. And so this definitely is causing a large amount of panic in the United States. And that is why you see that the United States is scrambling, moving around, running up and down, intimidating, China and the South China Sea. A few days we saw the United States flying planes within the South China Sea, causing chaos all over. They're just running all over, up and down, trying to cause chaos here. it is because they are very much alarmed, sending warships together with the United States and Canada, and sending warships within the waters of the South China Sea to provoke China. So they are confused that they are, they are panicking. This is the panic which is happening right now, that they are overwhelmed by the arrogance, and no one is telling them, come and intervene here, come and intervene there. They're just giving themselves this responsibility, which is uncalled for, because no one is calling you, come and interfere in our affairs. So they are so overwhelmed that they don't know how to deal with the new world which is emerging. And so they think that the only option is to cling on to power, is to cling on to the old order which they have known, for the last, 60 years or 70 years.
Interesting. Yeah, some of the things we have seen them already developing, how it was troubling South Africa, which is actually, it's an old way. I always say that one good thing about the US and its Western allies is that they have been consistent. They have been really consistent how they try to abuse you, try to throw you out. It's just us who have to pay attention and, change our narratives and the way we perceive things. And that's why we are here, to highlight and to bring information and to bring that knowledge. Let's talk about, a lot is happening. You have just told us in South Africa how that the US ambassador to South Africa came out and accused publicly, allegedly, South Africa supplying weapons. But also what we have seen in this foreign ministers meeting is that Madame Pandora, meaning the foreign relation minister, mentioned the importance of decreasing vulnerability to US sanctions. Now, can we conclude that somehow South Africa is planning to do something or preparing itself to put in a position where sanctions may be applied on this country? I mean, aside from what we are seeing in China and Russia, can we expect that? Please give us your view.
Yeah, I think on this question, I would like to look at, the past 20 years. I think South Africa has seen what has happened to countries like Zimbabwe, how Zimbabwe sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe for the last 20 years. And what was the reason for the imposition of those sanctions onto Zimbabwe? It was because Zimbabwe took back land which belongs to the African people from the colonizers. This is the reason why sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe, and to a certain extent they wanted to kill President President Mugabe, using people like Morgan Shangarai of the MDC, the so-called Movement for Democratic Change, that he was ganging up with the British and Canadians and the Americans, so that they can be able to kill President Mugabe, and certain people, were able to catch them. So South Africa saw what happened in Zimbabwe, how the result of taking back the land, what came from that, the effect of taking back the land. And South Africa today is facing a lot of challenges as a country inside. And there's unfinished business in South Africa, which is the business of giving back the land reformation in South Africa, to the extent that South Africa actually a few years ago had started mentioning about the land reform in the country. So there's a lot of pressure on the ANC as a government right now. As you have seen, even Malema is putting a lot of pressure that the land has to be taken back and given back to the rightful owners, who are the Africans. These few whites, a handful of whites, to occupy land and claim that they are digging it, they are farming it for the Africans, is not only arrogant but also racist. Is arrogant and racist. It's like claiming that the Africans cannot farm our own land. We need you to come from Europe and farm the land for us. I mean, it is absolutely arrogant. It is not the whites who are farming the land for the rest of the Africans on the continent, in the Congo, in Uganda, in Kenya, in Ghana, in Nigeria. It's not the whites who are farming the land for them. So why would you need whites to farm the land for the Africans in Zimbabwe, or the Africans in Namibia, or the Africans in South Africa? So I think that the government is facing a lot of pressure, and the fact that it has mentioned about it in the past, and also it has pressure from the EFF, which is led by Julius Malema. I think that the government is contemplating that step. But for you to move in that step, you have to have support. You have to have enough support from the various friendly countries. The countries who are friendly to you. And hence we have seen in the past, of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa engaging, the biggest, trading partners in the eastern part of the continent, in Uganda, Tanzania, inviting Kenya. We have seen him engage, in the past. We have seen him in Ghana. So I think that these are the right steps to be taken. And so it would be also, apart from engaging the continent and bringing them as a support mechanism, it is important to engage the other powerful countries across the globe who are economically strong. And that means, South Africa. Yeah, I mean, that means BRICS countries, and means Brazil. It means India. It means, Russia. It means, of course, China. We have seen how much China has supported Russia during this war, which is happening in Ukraine. That China's trade with Russia has almost doubled. So this is where now Russia is getting majority of the money, which is helping it to conduct the war. And of course, India also has supported. India has not caved into the demands and the pressure and the arrogance of the West, to tell it what to do. So India is also moving in that direction. So I think that this is a very strong support mechanism. So when such a thing as a currency comes up, then I think that South Africa feels very strongly that we have to champion this, because we also have interests at home. And this is we think that this is a mechanism, this is a tool that would help us to be able to overcome this challenge of sanctions.
Interesting. There's a lot of commenting. Now, can we conclude that China is, if we have seen these countries, meaning the founding members, or the one who are expressing to join BRICS, one way or the other, they have their issues with the US, and one way or the other, they have been bullied or something, by the US. So can we conclude that now? Let's look at on China and say that China using BRICS somehow to fight against the United States, and if there is a currency which I tried to mention before is going to be picked to replace this transaction for the trade currency, can we say that China's Yuan is going to replace dollar amongst these countries while they trade? What's your view?
I think China, of course, has expressed interest. I think there is two things here. China has expressed interest in dismantling the dollar, because from Donald Trump to Biden, the policy towards China has been the same. Is the policy of hostility and declaring China as an enemy, and sending warships in the South China Sea, and sending spy planes in the South China Sea. So China now has clearly understood it, that we are at war. So President Xi Jinping also decided to bring the war on and declare a war on the United States dollar. Hence, you see that he has encouraged countries to dump the dollar. So for China, actually, it would be dangerous if the United States collapsed at once. I mean, the United States dollar collapsed at once and countries dumped it at once. China doesn't want that. Why? Because China holds a very big chunk of the United States debt. So it has a big debt. You know, the two of them, China and Japan, they hold around $2 trillion of United States debt out of the $7.6 trillion of debt, you know, which is held by other countries, the debt of the United States. So China and Japan alone hold $2 trillion. I think China holds the biggest chunk of more than $1 trillion. So China doesn't want the dollar to collapse at once. What China wants to do is to carry out a controlled demolition. It wants the United States to be destroyed in a controlled manner. When you are carrying out a controlled demolition, it's like a building. You don't want it to fall at once, but rather you can go on top and start chipping off, you know, throwing off one block at a time. So a controlled demolition, that is what China wants. So what I see is that China doesn't necessarily want, the yuan, because China doesn't have plans of controlling the world. China just wants the world in you know, where countries dialogue and solve problems amicably, without going to war, without coercion, without, you know, a bullying. This is the world which China wants. So when it comes to the yuan, China doesn't necessarily want the yuan to replace the dollar. What China wants is just to defeat the dollar. That is it. So regardless of which currency comes on board and replaces the dollar, and that is why China has been encouraging countries to trade in their own currencies.
Okay.
You see, it's not forcing them that you should trade in the yuan. So it depends on you. If you feel that you want to trade in the yuan, you can trade in the yuan. So China wants to carry out a controlled demolition, and that is what it is trying to do to the United States. So it is causing this, it wants to cause this process to be less painful, because if they do it, you know, simultaneously, abruptly, the United States, of course, you know, it will become, you know, it's very violent. It is very violent. Things will collapse at home, and it will, in the process of distracting its people, it will go immediately and carry out war and find an excuse and start bombing places. You know, it will become violent if this thing collapses, you know, randomly, you know, all of a sudden, simultaneously. So China doesn't want this. He wants this thing to be less painful to the United States, but then it has to happen. China understands that it has to happen. And so that's why you see that President Xi, when he went to Saudi Arabia and visited Saudi Arabia, in front of the camera, he mentioned and said that China should start paying for Saudi Arabian oil in yuan. He asked the prince, you know, Mohammed bin Salman, that China should start being, you know, should start paying for its oil in yuan. China right now is the biggest importer of Saudi Arabian oil. And that is why we see this shift by Saudi Arabia, that it is now moving towards the BRICS countries. You know, Saudi Arabia right now is investing a lot of money, even in China. They are investing in a refinery in China. So they're putting money there. The United States turned itself around and said that it's an oil producer. So even though it is giving security to Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia still sees the United States now as a competitor when it comes to oil production. So these are the issues, these are the problems that we are seeing, that President Xi Jinping, whether it is Brazil, whether it is who, for him, he's pushing anything which can weaken the United States dollar and remove the United States from the position of arrogance which it has been occupying, you know, for all this long. And that is what we are seeing. This is the reaction which we are seeing. And even we did some analysis. I even did my analysis on, I did an analysis on my channel, where I pointed out that the war in Ukraine is about defeating Russia, but that war leads to China. That is where they want to go. They want to go and fight China. That is the target. But where will it end up? In case, God forbid, in case China is defeated, that war will end up in Africa. This is where it is going to end up. The worst case, the worst of this struggle between Russia and China will end up in Africa. How we are the ones who are going to be put back in servitude. Africans will be forced back in servitude. A very, very dangerous, extremely dangerous form of servitude, because they need to rebuild the United States. The United States is facing massive infrastructure, a collapse. You can go to Google and you can go to YouTube and check it. Even Donald Trump, during the campaigns, when he was campaigning for presidency, he was mentioning these things. The infrastructure in the United States is collapsing. So there's a need to rebuild the United States infrastructure. And where do they see the resources to do that? Those resources are in Africa. So when you move from Afghanistan to Russia to try to defeat Russia and defeat, China, the road is leading back to Africa. This is where everything is going to end up. So this is why it is very important as Africans to pay attention to what is going on across the globe. And that is why we are here also, we as Connect Africa, to try to break things down for you so that you can understand and then make your contribution, because this is not a joke. These things which are going on right now, they are not a joke. We are facing a very dangerous, period in history. The United States has already used a nuclear bomb before in Japan, and it can use it again. These are crazy people who are holding this power. They are crazy people, complete mad people, that they are irrational when it comes to power, the domination of the world. So don't be, mistaken about it. Don't doubt it that the United States cannot use a nuclear bomb, to drop it in China or drop it on Russia. They can use it. Look at how they are pouring weapons in Ukraine, which we have analyzed in the past. So China is not trying to coerce all the other people to use its currency, but it is pushing them in the direction of dumping the dollar and abandoning the dollar, which is of course good for everyone, because the United States and Europe, they have used this, for dubious means, for colonial means, for arrogancy, to go about preaching to everyone and destroying people's countries, destroying people's lives, killing, people, innocent people, millions and millions of people, across the world, in Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam. So this tool, which is empowering them to do that kind, of evil, to carry out this kind of arrogancy, that tool is the one which China and the BRICS are trying to remove from them.
Very interesting. Just, we have covered all our questions for tonight. I have a couple of things extended from what you have raised. You said, as we speak, Senator Blinken, now Foreign Secretary Blinken, is in Saudi Arabia, and for the reason we all know. What do we expect? Perhaps Saudi Arabia pulling out from its expression of interest to join BRICS, or dump China, because we know that when Secretary Blinken is in the continent, there is always something will come up. Just like in his last visit, he was in Ethiopia and Niger, and then the next thing we know, boom, Niger is hosting, can we say, allowing itself to have AFRICOM. So what possibly can happen?
Yeah, for Saudi Arabia, I really don't think he will get much out of it. Even when you look at the meeting which happened, the Saudis, when you look at the meeting, the shots which are coming out, the video shots, you could see that there was tension in the room, that the Saudis are not happy. So I really don't expect the United States to get much out of this, because they would want to coerce Saudi Arabia to drop down the price of oil, because they will say Russia is getting money from oil for the Ukraine war, which the Saudis, of course, will not accept, because the Saudis also, they are carrying out their own personal projects, like the prince Mohammed bin Salman is trying to build a city called Neom, which is going to be worth trillions of dollars. So the Saudis need about $70 per barrel of oil for them to be able to finance their infrastructure. So I really don't think that is something which is going to go through when it comes to, to forcing them to reduce oil. And the other thing which I see that it may be some form of apology, trying to apologize for the bullying that has been going on. Biden, when he was campaigning, of course, said that he was going to make Saudi Arabia a pariah state. He's a pariah. They are a pariah state, so he's going to make sure that they continue to be in that position. So this is something which annoyed, the Saudis, and of course, Biden went in there to try to make up the relationship and rehabilitate it, but still things did not go away. And Saudi Arabia has actually started playing a major role now, asserting itself. It's not only African countries which have asserted themselves. Saudi Arabia is also asserting itself in the region. And of course, they are working with China. So they are trying to pull it away from China because it has gone in the side of China. How Saudi Arabia decided to restore its relations, its relationship with Iran, which the United States did not want. They said they want Saudi Arabia to have a good relationship with Israel. So if Saudi Arabia and Iran have a good relationship, they see this as a problem for Israel because they may gang up against Israel. That is what is in their mind. If you listen to United States politicians, one of them said that even if Israel was not located in the Middle East, the United States would create another Israel in the Middle East. So this is what one of the United States politicians said. So this is what they say. And then of course, many people have been saying that Israel was not located in that region, but that's another, issue which needs, examination, here and there. But of course, they said it. The United States, politicians said it, that even if there was no Israel in the Middle East, the United States would create an Israel in the region. So it is pushing. The United States is pushing in that direction. Thinking that if they reduce the oil price, Saudi Arabia accepts to reduce the oil price, it will affect Russia. And then they don't want that relationship between, Saudi Arabia and Iran, because they have considered Iran an enemy for a long time. But Iran instead has been allowed by Saudi Arabia to open up an embassy. Even today, the embassy was reactivated today, which has been closed for many years. And they brought in also Syria. The United States has been bullying Syria together with Israel. They have been bullying Syria and bombing, Syria. Saudi Arabia and the Arab League were able to bring back Syria into their fold. So you can see that, Saudi Arabia is playing a major role, which they think they should. I think maybe they got that advice also from the Chinese. China came and advised them on how to play. So this is causing them a lot of trouble. It's causing the United States a lot of sleepless nights. And if there's anything to agree on, I think what they may agree on during this visit is that everyone should take care of their own interests, that Saudi Arabia also has interests. I think that is the message which is going to be there, that they should share only where they agree on, like in security. If the United States still wants, Saudi Arabia will continue to buy its military, gadgets to be able to protect themselves in the Middle East. So this is what I see, that they are trying to make their country independent of the United States. And the United States is trying to show that we are still players in this area. We can still help you here and there. But the Saudis are saying that we have to try to make our, country, independent, as much independent as possible.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Really, I'm glad that I asked. Now, just before we close up, I don't see African countries or Pan-African platforms like us media platforms really covering the message that's coming out of BRICS. And I mean, if we don't really bring that information and knowledge to our people, then we are just like the mainstream media who is trying to overshadow it, whether President Putin will participate, will come or not. That was the most important thing for them. So what do you have? What message do you have, for Africans? Whether it can be in national broadcasts or media platforms like us, YouTube channels, or others in every profession that we are. What should we think of, BRICS? And we don't see Nigeria. Nigeria is nowhere to be seen, or maybe I'm mistaken.
Yeah, I think countries like Nigeria really, it is unfortunate that Nigeria is not playing an important role on the African continent. With Nigeria being the biggest economy and the most populous country on the African continent, Nigeria really needs to take up a major role on the continent in representing the continent. It needs to take up that position that it is supposed to occupy, and instead it should not be small countries like Rwanda, which we have seen on numerous occasions, Eritrea, very small countries with less than 7 million people, 10 million people. They are the ones who have been representing the continent with lesser even GDP. So I think it is time for Nigerian politicians and heads of state to step up to that point, to step up to that position whereby they should be able to represent the continent, looking at their capacity, because they say that to whom much is given, much is also expected. So if Nigeria has been given so much, but at the same time it is just playing dumb, is just playing sort of not the Nigerian people, but the Nigerian leadership, of course. It's just they are just playing dumb. They're just playing a subordinate, as a subordinate to the imperialists, and allowing them to exploit our people in the Niger Delta, everywhere, symphony of oil, like we have seen Shell stealing oil for more than 9 years through a pipeline, which they are operating on a terminal, which they are operating, stealing oil for 9 years. So if they continue to allow this kind of behavior, I think it will be detrimental for the African continent. So we expect countries like Nigeria, to be at the forefront, Ethiopia to be at the forefront, Angola, Egypt, of course, Egypt has applied, to be at the forefront of those countries, Morocco, at the forefront of those countries who are applying to join BRICS, because they occupy a very important, position on the African continent. And when it comes to our media, I really think that our media on the African continent has to step up and stop falling in the trap of sensationalism. I've been reading news on the internet, but when you look at African newspaper, it's like they have been captured by the imperialists. They are putting those catchy clickbait, subtitles. Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen the twerking? Have you seen, yet we have a continent to take care of. We have a continent to rebuild. I think that the African media should reflect the aspirations of African people, instead of feeding the African people onto illusions of Lamborghini and all these expensive cars, these white women who are half naked, all these are the things which we are seeing that some of our media houses are showing sensationalism. So which is unfortunate. We want the African media should be focused on bringing things which are important to the African people, to be filled with the aspirations of the African people, to represent the African personality, like how Nkrumah, called it. This is what we want the media on the African continent to be. This is what we expect of the media, instead of sensationalism, and spending hours and hours on European football. Hours and hours on European football. This is what we are seeing our media, spending time on. So, it becomes unfortunate, but I think our media houses need to step up and move in the direction of issues that represent the continent, the political aspirations of the continent. In all fields, they teach our people about the resources which we have in the ground, the potential of everything that we have as African people, and how these resources can be used for the reconstruction of the African continent, or even how the events that are going on across the globe, like we've mentioned, the BRICS summit, which is coming up. Very few of them have reported about it. And these are important things that we should spend time on, because they affect us, and they affect us greatly. Thank you very much, Mahlet.
Okay, I'm muted. Thank you very much, Kwame, for that. Really, I have enjoyed, and I'm sure our viewers have enjoyed from this analysis as you unfolded what's going on behind that meetings, foreign ministers meeting of the BRICS. Yeah, it's really important. I'm glad what we are doing brings knowledge, information to our brothers and sisters out there, so they start to pay attention to what's happening that affects, that impacts the continent positively or negatively, so we can be prepared. Yeah, then having said that, I think that's it for us for today. Please, if you find this information, this discussion relevant to you, then give it a like, subscribe, and share it with your network, with your friends. And also, if you want to support us, for us, we want to be here more during the week. Right now, we are here twice a week. So you can support us through our PayPal account, which I have put here in the chat section. And of course, the super chat and super stickers are also available. Yeah, thank you very much. Everything that you do, whether you share it or you give us a hand, you support us, it's all good. So tomorrow, again, we will be here, myself and Kwame. So just tune in. Yeah, have a good evening. Kwame, thank you very much. Really, thank you. Yeah. All right. So bye-bye.